All right, everybody. I am a little ginger on my feet right now, but my staff wrote me this really great speech that I don't feel fully in the mood to read, but I'm going to put it up here and reference it from time to time. I was so excited when my staff told me about this before the fact that I realized I would have been up a long time the night before, but I'm really excited just to be in a community of people that believes in a lot of the same core values that I do. I think human history, and American history is in particular, are perpetual testimony to the achievement of impossible things. I think innovators and artists and people who can see beauty and possibility are the most valuable people there are. When I first came out of law school, I had a mother that said to me, this is like one of the greatest gifts she's ever given me. In fact, what she said to me is on my desk. She said to me, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my career, with my life, and she just asked me this basic question and demanded that I answer it. She said, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? I want you to go and do that. And I didn't have an answer to her, but what she did was trigger me to have a bigger imagination. And so I started making a list of the most inspiring people in my world that I could think of. And on that list were Brian Stevenson, who was at the time not as well known, but was a death penalty defender that stood in the darkest, most forgotten places and stood up for the people that everybody else wanted to condemn. On my list was a woman named Marian Wright Edelman. She led something called the Children's Defense Fund. And I just believed back then, as I do now, that genius is the most valuable thing on the planet. In fact, the most valuable natural resource, not gold or oil, the most valuable natural resource in our world is the genius of our children, and it's equally distributed around the planet. There's as many geniuses being born in Beverly Hills as there are being born per capita in Newark, New Jersey, and the problem we had as a country is we weren't cultivating and unleashing that genius on the world. How many Einsteins or Picassos did we not get a chance to experience because they did not have a fair environment to grow up in? And another person on the list, though, was Jeffrey Canada, a guy who was got a MacArthur Genius Grant because he went into the toughest neighborhoods in Harlem and just started serving people and created something called the Harlem Children's Zone. I decided he was my model after most of them were generous enough to let me follow them around. And I moved to Newark to do what he did in Harlem. I moved into the toughest neighborhood I can find, and I was overwhelmed by what I saw. First time I would go to sleep hearing gunshots. And I was afraid. But there's an old saying, and I think I experienced a little bit of that last Monday, that when you come to the end of all the light you know, and you have the courage, as many of the entrepreneurs in this room do, have the courage to step out there in pursuit of your dreams, that out of your comfort zone into that darkness, that faith is knowing one of two things are going to happen. Either you're going to find solid ground underneath you, or the universe will send you people that'll teach you how to fly. And so I come to Newark and I meet this extraordinary entrepreneur, otherwise the tenant president of these high-rise projects, who looked at me when I said to her, I'm Cory Booker, I'm from Yale Law School, I'm here to help you. And she looked at me like I needed help, and in fact, at that point, I really did. And she did this test to me. She had me come downstairs in the projects where she lived on the 5th floor. We went down the elevator into the middle of the street, Martin Luther King Boulevard, and she says, what do you see around you? And I go, what do you mean? She goes, describe my neighborhood. And I described it sort of like I described to you before. There was a crack house on the corner, a project. I just described it. The more I talked, the more upset with me she looked. And then eventually, she said, you can't help me. And she starts walking away from me. And I chase after her and grab her from behind very, very respectfully. And I say, what are you talking about? And she said, boy, you need to understand something. The world you see outside of you is a reflection of what you have inside of you. And if you're one of those people who only sees darkness and despair and problems, that's all there's ever going to be. But if you're one of those people that when you open your eyes, you see possibilities, you see hope, you see opportunity, you see love, you see the face of God, then you're one of those people that can help me. And she left me there on the street, looking at my shoes, thinking to myself, okay, grasshopper, thus endeth the lesson. I have been blown away to come out of Stanford in the 1990s and meet these visionary entrepreneurs that had that kind of spirit. I mean, my life has been so enriched by the innovator, the entrepreneur, the visionary. And what we need is an environment that helps to create a nurturing soil for more of that to happen. I think that one of the most important things we need to be talking about in America now, first, is creating a fair, level playing field. But that's the foundation. We need to start talking about how we are going to boldly push the limits of what's possible in humanity. And I hate that we are only looking left and right now. We're not looking up. We're only looking at the other side, what they're doing, and we're not looking to the skies. When I was at Stanford as a football player, and I realized I could really help in East Palo Alto just by showing up with my jersey, and I was working with these kids, and I had this, what I thought as a 19-year-old, a profound exercise that I've done with rooms like this before, where I asked people to raise their hands as high as you can, and then people usually do, and then I say, okay, go 3 inches higher, and people strain, and then they realize, wait a minute, I'm sitting down, I could have stood up. And it was always my lesson. You can always do more, your thoughts, your vision. And so I did this with these kids, and the kids said they didn't want to do it. And I resorted to a form of persuasion with these kids, often associated with my profession, bribery. I pulled out a $5 bill and I said, $5 for the kid who can raise his hand the highest. And I love capitalism. These kids were innate capitalists. They did the cost-benefit analysis, and they realized, okay, the effort's worth it, $5. And they shot their hands in the air. And now they're all competing against each other, and I'm about to pounce on them with my profound lesson of a 19-year-old, and then I see the youngest kid with his arms crossed, his face in a pout. He's the shortest of the lot. He came from a difficult home, and the last person I wanted to squelch their imagination. And so I was about to step towards him to just hug him and comfort him, and then he makes a beeline, sprints out of the room, and I run after him, grab him from behind, and I say, Robert, where are you going? And he starts struggling, and I go, what's wrong? He said, you said you'd give $5 to the kid who can raise his hand the highest, right? And I said, yeah. And he goes, well, I know a way to get to the roof. That's where we need to be in America right now. It pains me to have, and I hope that the filming people here won't be upset, but I'd rather come down. It pains me right now that we have a country where we spend so much of our energy talking about other people and not talking about possibilities. It pains me right now that our sense of patriotism is getting lost as people with power and people with advantage often are thinking about how they can get more power and more advantage to the point where it's not fair anymore. It pains me that we've created an environment where our genius doesn't thrive. And this is where I give a lot of credit to my Republican colleagues for hammering these nails over and over and over again. But I came to Washington as this entrepreneurial mayor who was already frustrated with regulations because they stopped me from doing, or tried to stop me from doing big things in Newark that could have helped a lot of people, but I had to deal with the EPA, I could go through stories that I don't have time for, unless this is a 25-hour speech. But I got on the Commerce Committee, and I saw on the Commerce Committee that everywhere I looked, government was over-regulating entrepreneurs. I'll give you some examples. I knew the person. They started a company called 23andMe. Back then, it was so hot, so exciting. But the FDA said, nope, sorry, you can't do this. You can't scrape your cheek, send it off, and get back information. I was like, what, are you kidding me? Then there was nuclear regulations. I grew up with a lot of scary stories about nuclear, but I started seeing that the next generation nuclear, modular nuclear, it was like science fiction. It could solve our energy problems. But I was hearing stories that nuclear regulators were leaving the United States because we had such a regulatory framework that it wasn't allowing the people to do the research, to do the work. We were losing nuclear scientists. One of my favorite examples was the drone industry. I started talking to these innovators in the drone industry, talking to me about what drones could do, and then seeing examples from other countries that these drones could fix poles where we in America were having people dying in that dangerous job, or do mine surveys in places that are dangerous, but the only licenses the FAA was releasing was to the movie industry. And these innovators were saying, this is crazy. I finally had my chance. The head of the FAA comes in and I said, sir, if you were around during the time of Orville and Wilbur Wright, we would have never got the airline industry off the ground. I think bureaucracy can be stifling. I think that we, as America, should be having our economy and our government move at the speed of innovation and help and empower innovators. Because that, to me, is the hope. There are problems right now that, as I like to think, I'm imaginative, creative, that we don't know how to solve right now. It's like that story in New York about their big health problem where they had piles and piles of shit, just everywhere, horse shit. I know you think that that's kind of Washington, but this was literal horse shit. And they couldn't figure out how to solve the problem. They had commissions come together. What are they going to do with all the horse shit on the island? Dumping into the river created horrible pollution. And then finally one day, the problem was gone because of something people couldn't imagine or see. The automobile was invented. I fear we need a restart in our country. We really do. Somebody needs to say time out. That every problem of my life is not Donald Trump, and every problem of his life isn't, pick your person, Chuck Schumer or Hakeem Jeffries. That the real problem is not people, it's our ability to begin to reimagine possibility. Now look, I am worried. I'm not giving a pass to anybody. I mean, to me, the most important thing we start with is just fairness. Like every American has this compass and then like, is this fair or not? Well, there are a lot of things happening right now that just aren't fair and are anti-democratic. This value of being in a capitalist entrepreneurial society and a multicultural democracy, I think they're not competitive. I think they fit together so well that the principles of democracy, the values that this country are founded with, is the secret sauce for our capitalist system when it's fair, when we focus on that value of fairness. This is why I love that our founders worked so hard, these imperfect geniuses that wouldn't have seen my dignity at the time, but they were still geniuses because they grappled. They said this is not going to be a nation formed on a monarchy, divine rights of kings and queens. We're not going to be theocracy. We are going to try to make a nation built on values, shared values, the highest ideals of humanity. I think that's what's informed our democracy at the best. But when we veer away from our democratic traditions, when it's a zero-sum game, winner take all, crush the competition, even if you're violating your values, that's not fairness. That hurts everybody. And so I was excited when my staff said, get on the antitrust committee. My staff comes to me with all the great ideas, and then I take credit for them. We jumped on the antitrust committee because we saw that entrepreneurs, business people were getting crushed in areas that made no sense, that was not fair. Our food system is a screaming example to people with advantage compounding their advantage, forming these anti-democratic, anti-American values situation and hurting everybody. I went out west to visit with farmers, because farmers, it's horrible what's been happening. We don't talk about it, but thousands and thousands of farmers going out of business as these massive concentrations in the food industry are happening, disappearing family farmers. And I went out and I told the people, my Sherpas, I want to meet Republican farmers who probably don't like me. And we did. We went to these farmers. I still remember this one guy coming out to me. He looked mean, looked like he was angry at me. And I knew that he only understood who I was through the lens of reactionary hate media. And I'm not saying that's only on the right. And I tried to loosen him up when he was showing me his cows. And I go, sir, these cows are utterly amazing. I milked every cow joke I could find. I'm sorry. What do you call a guy with no kids who still tells dad jokes? A faux pas. This is a tough crowd. You guys are tough. It's been a long day, huh? I sat down at the table with these guys, and we started talking about concentration. Proudly, they had their original deeds from 5 generations ago, but now they told me that math didn't work for them anymore. They told me about that their dads used to have 5 people competing for their goods. Now there was only one buyer. The guy, his neighbor, he kept pushing him, tell him. The neighbor was afraid to even speak for fear that the company would find out and just punish them, cut them off. I see what's happening in the chicken and the pig industries where they've There's no more independent farmers. They're all contract farmers being dictated to companies. They don't even know the prices they're going to get. They create these illegal things. I think they're illegals. I put bills to try to stop them called a tournament system, but they don't even know how they're being graded. There's no transparency. There's such corporate concentration there and lack of enforcement of the Stockyard and Packers Act. It's outrageous. The whole food industry is like that. Upton Sinclair wrote The Jungle about the same problem, corporate concentration resulting in horrific working conditions. It's a scary book. It exposed it. Some incredible people who said, no, we need competition, we need to break it up. But guess what's happened since the 1980s? The industry has reconcentrated, more concentrated than it was when Upton Sinclair wrote about it. And everybody is getting hurt. Everybody gets hurt from a system like that. Now, I live in Newark, New Jersey, as I told you before. I'm hurt by this broken food system and this corporate concentration. How am I hurt by it? Well, we've decided government to pick winners and losers. We've decided we're going to use all of our money. 93% of your ag subsidies that you pay for go to big corporate ag that produces 5 commodity crops. We have subsidized a broken system that only subsidizes those crops. If you grow fruits and vegetables, you're not getting any subsidies. They're called specialty crops. So what does that create? It creates a situation where my kids in Newark walk into a bodega and a Twinkie product is cheaper than an apple. Not because of the true cost, not because of the free market, but because we, government, have corrupted the system along with big monopolies and have created a system that is actually making Americans sick. Our grandparents didn't have these diabetes rates, these hypertension rates, these stroke rates, these cancer rates. There's no fairness here. It's choking democracy. And so I see that my clock is running out here, and I haven't even gotten to the points I want to make, but the unfairness is crazy. And this is where I get upset. Let's call balls and strikes. The FTC, we don't want a system where a big bully, a powerful person comes in and fires that. We benefit from having this idea of Democrats and Republicans on the committee bringing their ideas. That's ridiculous. Let me give you another thing that's crazy. Mergers right now. I talked to a merger attorney, he's a friend of mine, before here, talking about all these firms having to make the terrible decision. If you're doing M&A at a big firm, you need to come to the government, work with the government. Now we have a leader in our country that's basically saying, you need to come and kowtow to me if your firm is going to survive. Because you're not going to get a fair shake on whether your clients and the M&A, no, you need to come to me and kowtow to me. As I said last night in this long speech, it's not, ask not what your country can do for you, what you can do for your country. It's, ask not what your country can do for you, but just tell me what you can do for me. We have to get back to a nation that has this audacious sense of possibility, and then we need to create a fair, democratic, capitalist environment where people can compete, where once you come be successful, you don't get to punish and stop. Big tech doesn't get to punish little tech and say, hey, you don't have the ability to be as big and as successful as I am because I'm going to use all my market bullying to stop you. That's not fair. I can't believe that this administration has decided, oh, we're going to drop cases against PBMs. You guys know what PBMs are? This is one of the reasons why the anti-competitive practices that are driving up the cost of our prescription drugs to the way that is just, again, a perversion of the free market and our democratic principles. And I tell you what, it hurts people. One of the biggest problems right now is that most Americans, justifiably so, think the system is screwing them. Everywhere they look, the system is screwing them. And you know what? They're kind of right. Big concentration in the drugs that they depend upon, in the food that is causing them to be sick and need the drugs in the first place. I could go on and on and on. It is these big corporate concentrations that create not a fair system that is screwing them over. And so that should be a bipartisan cause. Create fair markets, fair systems, get rid of the hyper-bureaucracy, make it easier for innovators and entrepreneurs to innovate and to create up tomorrow. Now, I'm over my time. I want to finish with a story because I'm in love with a couple things. I'm in love with the arts, and I'm in love with tech and innovation. So why am I doing what I'm doing? I don't know. But God, going to Stanford in the 90s, the late 80s, it was so exciting to be in Silicon Valley during that period. But I want to end with a story about that because my dad was born poor. And if he was here, he'd heckle me. He said, don't tell those innovators I was poor. Tell them the truth. I was P-O. I couldn't afford the other two letters. He was poor in the South. And this is the story I want to end on. Single mother. I have my whole family tree now. Back into slavery, it was all poverty. Single mother's poverty till my dad. 1936, he was born. And his mother couldn't take care of him. He found I call it a conspiracy of love. People taking care of him in the community, sent him off to college, got the money from a church collection plate to enroll in North Carolina Central and HBCU, ended up here in Washington to people who are committed to fairness. This is why all this stuff about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it bothers me. There was a tech company at the time that was like, we need to make sure that when we're looking for the most qualified people, we have an applicant pool that really is representing all the people. So they were looking for people that graduated from HBCUs to say, hey, let's find actually the best, a merit system. And my dad became IBM's first black salesman. A tech company changed his destiny. At the dawn of the computer age, where there was this incredible triumphant, a special American thing that now China's trying to do. It was this combination between academia, why the hell are we cutting science and research to academia, cutting overhead costs? It's killing the goose that's laying the golden egg. It was academia, it was government doing things right, funding research around mainframes and more, using top innovations to keep our country safe and strong, and it was industry, it was entrepreneurs that were getting it done. It was an exciting time, and here is this kid who gets a job with that company. But my dad tells me about the arts. He says, I couldn't believe it. When I was a kid in a segregated balcony, I watched this show about a guy who was in this place that looked like a different planet. It was, for a kid in rural South, it was a place that had all these big buildings. It was Manhattan. And the guy was getting by on his salesmanship because he was just nice and kind and could talk to anybody and was successful. And so my dad gets hired by IBM. Those are the professional traits he admired. And next thing you know, he is IBM's one of their top global salesmen. He's in their 5%, the IBM Golden Circle, selling computers and all the innovations that innovators are doing, and he gets hired to go to the corporate headquarters, Madison Avenue, New York. That's how I ended up in New Jersey. And now he's crushing it. But suddenly he stops one day on a street corner looking at these big buildings and goes, holy crap, this was a vision planted in my head as a little boy in a segregated balcony. It was art that inspired me. Innovators at a time that we were enforcing antitrust laws, at a time that we were working with lots of different companies. My dad knew competition. Oh, Xerox is doing this company's doing this. I got to make my quotas. I got to explain why my products are better. When the products were crap, he would go back and tell people, this product's crap, we got to do it better. Well, this is how the story ends. My dad gets Parkinson's. How dare we cut science and innovation? I could tell you stories right now about us cutting money going to colleges for whatever reason we're mad at colleges. Oh, well, let's show our anger by cutting scientists' money. They're cutting off PhD programs. They're cutting down the number of postdocs they take. There are people researching Parkinson's right now and dementia that are not getting a chance to do what they're doing. My dad is dying of that disease, and we go to Israel. My last chance to take my dad on a trip, and my mom says, I thought you said a beach someplace, but we're in Israel. And my dad does something that scares me. He starts looking at this city that we were in and starts sunsetting. If anybody who has a father or mother or knows somebody with Parkinson's, where he starts sunsetting. You go back to this time that things were great, and suddenly he's talking as if he's in the 1980s. And he's talking like a salesman would. He goes, look at the opportunity here. Whoever has this sector could sell a lot of computers, could sell a lot of laptops. And I'm looking at this man, I'm thinking he's joking at first, but he's not joking. This man suffering from dementia thinks it's the 1980s. And I said, Dad, do you have children? He goes, oh, I've got these two great boys. There's nothing they can't achieve. He starts going on his two children, looking at his child. And I go, how old are they? He goes, they're 8 and 6. And I looked at my father and I said, Dad, I'm your child. I'm your son. And suddenly it clicked back into him what had happened to him. And he starts crying. He realizes how sick he is and he's terrified. This strong, beautiful man knows he's got a debilitating disease. My dad then started to realize this is the last time. I don't know what's going to happen to me. I want to start telling my son everything that he had already taught me, everything that he had already infused into my very being. But one of the things he tried to tell me, I want to leave you with. He said, son, I want you to be kind. I want you to be fair. And with grit and guts and sacrifice, I want you to change this world. Well, to the innovators here and anybody that's hearing my voice, be kind. Be good to one another. Be fair. Demand fairness. Demonstrate fairness. And I know in that position, I'm going to try to be one of the people that creates a fairer system. And then most importantly of all, be audacious. Be bold. We need you. We need the innovators, the entrepreneurs, the artists of imaginations to change this world. Thank you.